Thank you. I'm Lynn and I am an alcoholic and I'm glad to be here tonight. Nervous, but glad to be here tonight. It was so good listening to the promises because I was thinking they always calm me down because, they all come true. It's an amazing thing. Just listening to them is a great experience. So anyway, I got my sobriety date is July 2nd, 1980. And I was I got sober in the Mamaroneck group, the world famous Mamaroneck group in New York. I grew up in New York. I grew up in the suburbs of New York, nice Westchester suburbs, and had a nice childhood, lived in a nice house. Everything was good. I was an only child, which I didn't like so much, but that's how it was. And I was certainly spoiled, and uh, life was good. I went to a Catholic school and had friends and, felt like a normal person, normal kid. But I had a lot of anxiety even then. I remember when we used to go around the room and read, and I was afraid my voice would be shaky when I read. And I'd be counting how many people before they get to me, looking at which paragraph am I going to have to read because I would get nervous. And I guess it started even in grammar school, just that anxiety, um, wanting to sound better, wanting to be better. Um, and it just kind of continued from there. My family was very nice. I grew up, my grandmother lived with us. I loved my grandmother. We had a wonderful dog. I loved my dog, Mac. I remember when Mac died, I was 14. And when I look back now, that was like the beginning of the end of my really good part of life there. Because he was 14. I remember him lying in the kitchen. He had this one little warm spot in the kitchen he loved to sleep on. And my parents told me that he was probably not going to make it through the night. And I remember saying goodbye to him. And I just felt so sad. And when I look back, I still feel it when I say it. When I look back, I just think of that as kind of the beginning of the downfall of my life there. Um, a lot of things went on, and my anxiety got worse. I decided I didn't want to go to private high school, Catholic high school, so I went to a public school, and I really kind of crashed and burned. I was overwhelmed with anxiety and fear. And I used to just take off during the day and just um, walk around the neighborhood, just walk around anywhere where I didn't know where to go. I didn't want them to know I was cutting school, didn't want my parents to know. And I was just afraid to go back. It was really, really hard. And I ended up having a home tutor for a while because I really couldn't handle it. And that helped a little bit, but my anxiety was still pretty bad, and I was getting so I didn't really want to be with anybody. I kind of lost my friends and life kind of got away from me. And I remember we moved to Long Island because I think I always blame myself, but I'm sure I was only 16, so I don't know how much I had to do with it. But I wanted a geographic cure, and I thought if I could start over in a new place where people didn't know about my anxiety and all the crazy stuff that went through my head, that I'd be okay. And I convinced my parents, they sold the house. We moved to Long Island and I hated it. I hated every minute of it. I didn't want to be there. I wanted them to move back. And life just just got worse and worse. My father passed away while we were out there. I was sitting in the family room watching TV, and my father and I weren't getting along too well at that point. And I remember hearing a noise in the kitchen, a really loud noise. And I turned around and my father was on the floor. And he got up and he said, "No, I'm okay. I think I just fell asleep." And my mother and grandmother were all upset and excited and didn't know what to do. And then he fell again and he was dead, and that was it. Um, it was a horrible experience. I still can, when I hear a loud noise today, all these years later, I mean, I'm in my 70s now, and I hear a loud noise and it's like, what was that? I'm like 16 all over again, just hearing that sound of my father just thudding on the floor. And I blamed myself. I thought, well, if I hadn't been angry at him, he wouldn't have died. And it was just crazy. It was a really, really hard time. And we lived there for another year. My father, unfortunately, did not leave much insurance. And I guess he didn't expect to die at the age of 47. And we moved back to Westchester, where we lived in an apartment. And my mother went to work. My grandmother was too old to go to work, but she she lived with us still. And life was very different. It was very, very different than what I had grown up with. We lived in a city, Mount Vernon, a nice section of it, of course, but it was still not what I was used to. And my friends were all in another town now. And even if I could have had anything to do with them, with my social anxiety, they were kind of far away. So I I had gotten my license. That was this was a real, just to show how self-absorbed and how just disobedient, I guess. I don't know. I got my license, and one after the other, I got three speeding tickets, and I lost my license. They took my license away, so I couldn't even drive. And I just felt like I was really stuck. Um, anyway, life went on. It kind of got a little bit better. I lived with my mother. My grandmother passed away the following year, so it was just the two of us. And it was depressing. And along this time, I had discovered that if I bought a bottle of Gallo sherry or Gallo port, and it was really inexpensive, I could get a bottle back then for 69 cents. And I could just have a drink and I would feel better. So I wasn't even drinking to be like other people. I was just to be social. I mean, I was drinking because it was medicinal. I really thought of it as medicinal. And I did that for a long time. I would put on sad music, I'd put on, I don't know, the Animals or whoever was out back then, some really groups that did some really, really good stuff. And I would drink my wine and just sit there and feel sad. I liked it. I would just sit there and feel sad. And I didn't work. I don't know why. I guess I couldn't because of the anxiety. I just didn't think I was capable of it. And my mother was supporting us. Um, and then I met this guy. That's a big part of my story. You'll always hear the next phase starts with, I met this guy. And I met this guy who became my first husband, God help him. And I was just really not ready to enter into a relationship like that. I really wasn't. I wanted to have a baby. I thought if I had a baby, he'd stay with me forever and ever. We'd live happily ever after. So I made sure I got pregnant as soon as I could. And I'm thankful today that I have that daughter because she's amazing and I love her. But I was no way ready to have a baby at that point in my life. And I, of course, moved back in with my mother when my first husband left. He said he couldn't take it anymore. I went back and forth for a while. We had gotten this apartment and we furnished it, and the furniture hadn't come, and I had already left. And he called me and he said that the furniture came, and I thought, well, maybe I'll go back because I want to see the furniture. I want, that it was the way I thought. I just very shallow. And then, of course, it didn't work out, and I left again, and it was just a mess. It was really very immature marriage. We didn't make it for 2 months living together. And then, of course, it was just the divorce process that took about a year and a half. So in the meantime, I moved back in with my mother. And so now she had me to support and a baby to support. And I just didn't think anything of it. I thought, well, she's my mother. That's what she's supposed to do, I guess. And I couldn't work. It was just I think of it now, I think how selfish it was, but I had no idea back then that that was a selfish thing to do. Anyway, my daughter I loved her very much. She was really important to me, of course. And for the first couple of, well, maybe a year, she got to be a year old and I didn't drink. By this time I was on Valium though. I had gone to a psychiatrist for my anxiety and I told him about the drinking and he suggested that Valium would help me not to drink. And it did, it helped me somewhat not to drink, but I still drank on the Valium later on. And but the Valium got me through it was some of those years when she was little and growing up. And I was with my mother. My mother was very good to us. She really loved my daughter, and it was a nice little group, but it just wasn't enough for me. And I got to the point where I wanted to go out and kind of, meet some people. And my mother was very possessive at that point. I know she had been suffering from the years of my drinking, and she didn't want me to go out drinking. She knew if I went out, that meant I was going to drink. And I had found I had trapped myself. I was so trapped because I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't go and meet people. I couldn't go out on a date. I couldn't go out and have a drink because she would say things to me in front of my daughter. And I loved my daughter so much. I didn't want her to have any bad opinions of me. And, my mother would say things like, oh, Lynn, you have a daughter. You're not going to go out and leave your daughter. And it just was very, very difficult. And of course, I went out anyway, because once you need a drink, you need a drink. And once I was out drinking, that's when I really started to drink. And I just wanted to read this thing from the big book that I noticed today. I mean, I've seen it before, but it says that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Well, that was me. I liked the effect. I liked that all of a sudden I felt like I belonged on the earth. I was okay. I was like other people. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it's injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented until they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they've succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. And that's where I spent the next 8 years, I'd say, in that cycle of swearing it off, always with the Valium, though. The Valium was a daily thing. That was my norm. And then I needed to drink to feel better sometimes. And I would go out. There'd be the fighting. My mother would say something, and my daughter would be upset. But I had to go. I had to go. And then I'd come home feeling ashamed, feeling, I know I did things out there that I shouldn't have been doing. And when I got home, I was getting the cold shoulder, everybody hated me in the house. And I felt bad for my daughter because she didn't know what to do. And I remember the look in her eyes that would just break my heart when I knew that she knew I was drinking. And so we went on like that for, I'd say, about 8 years. And something changed in that period of time. I had an aunt who I really loved, my mother's sister, who passed away. She died of, she died. And at the same time, there was this crazy thing. My mother worked at this company in New Rochelle, New York, and they had, I guess, like one of the first on-site shootings, in-site shootings where a crazy guy came into the company with a gun and he terrorized everyone. They had people hiding all over the building and it was all over the news. My mother, fortunately, had not gotten to work yet that day, so she wasn't there. But it was a big, big deal. And it really, really scared me. It was very, very big deal. And I started to think how my life was kind of going on and I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't getting anywhere. And I decided I would go back and finish my education. I would go at night. And I figured the Valium will be enough. I knew if I took a drink, that would be not a good thing because it would get me, I wouldn't be able to study and it just wouldn't be good. And drive, of course, but I didn't really worry about that too much. So I went back to school at night and I met a guy. And that was the next phase of my life. He was in one of the classes I was taking, and I could still, to this day, see him sitting across from me wearing the green sweater. And I just was so attracted to something about him that I wanted to get to know him. So during the break, we kind of talked a little bit. And he asked me, he called me the next day, asked me if I'd like to go out for coffee. And I said, why don't we go out for a glass of wine? And he said from that moment on, he knew I was probably an alcoholic because he was in AA and had been sober for about 3 years. But he took me out for wine, which I guess wasn't the best thing for somebody 3 years sober to do. But we did go out and I absolutely got obsessed with this guy. And I think a lot of the obsession was the fact that he was in AA. It was the first person I ever met who I identified so strongly with. And when he talked about how he felt and AA and drinking, and I just, it was like meeting somebody from another planet when I'm from another planet. It was just so great. It was really great. And I got obsessed with him. And I just, my mother was giving me such a hard time about going out with him and how could I leave my daughter and go out. And God forbid I stayed overnight one night. And it was like, oh, you're such a, what you are. And I just couldn't take it. And I didn't want my daughter to be seeing all this. And so I started coming home less and less. And I would call and say, I'm going to stay tonight and tomorrow night, and I'll be back on Monday. Or it was like a little at a time till I finally moved in. And my daughter I left my daughter with my mother. But I mean, I think of it now and it was horrible. But I had no choice at that point. It was like I had to get out of where I am. My life is going nowhere. I knew Stu would be taken care of. I knew that my mother was going to be good to her and she'd be okay. But at the same time, I knew I was never going to have a life as long as I stayed there. And, my daughter and I have talked about it since. And of course, now she's in her 50s. So she looks back and she said, I know you had to leave. She said, how could you couldn't do anything other than leave. And that made me feel so good when she said that, because I just didn't think that was the right thing to do, but I had to do it. And I was so upset with myself over doing it that I started seeing a psychiatrist and telling him there's something wrong with me because this is not my kind of behavior. I don't do these things. I'm a good mother. I'm a good mother. And it just, it just was so hard to understand. So of course, I now living with an alcoholic in AA, I couldn't drink openly and I had to hide it. And it's not easy to hide alcohol from someone who's an alcoholic. Um, I was no way near going to give up those Valium pills because I thought that's the only thing that's keeping me going in between drinking. And he thought that was, not sobriety, and you can't have that. And so I had to hide everything. I hid the pills, I hid the whatever I was doing. And I remember once I had gotten a job and I left the pills in my desk at work because I thought they'd be safer there. I was afraid he'd find them and throw them away. And they were very hard to get, believe me. And I woke up that morning and I had the worst fever. I was so sick. I think I had the flu or something. And I had to go get those pills. And I walked all the way. It was like a 2-mile walk to get to the building where I worked. Took the elevator, went upstairs, got the pills, came down, went home, went back to bed. And I mean, I can't believe I did that. It was just desperation. So anyway, that went on for a while. And we, it was not the greatest relationship. It didn't, obviously, are you surprised? It didn't work out. And we just, I kept being there because I didn't want to go back to my mother and I didn't see any other choices. And then, I realized I could get a place of my own, but that I did do that for a little while. And I don't know, it just, I guess I did do that for a little while, but it still was not really what I was looking forward to in life or what my life should be, I thought. So I eventually went to the Marinette group. I was out of his place now, and I found a place when I had to. I found one, and it was like a rooming house, and I got it was a nice room, but it was a rooming house, and I stayed there. It was inexpensive and in a kind of a safe place. A lot of AA people around because it was there was an AA group there, and a lot of people stayed there. And I just trying to think what the next thing was that happened. It just got worse and worse and worse, I guess, Now I was out of there, I could drink when I wanted to, so that was not good. And I would show up at the Rye Harrison meeting and I'd be drunk. I was always getting lost trying to find meetings because I didn't know where I was going. And then people were so nice to me in AA. They would talk to me and I loved all the attention and it just kept going. So finally, when I was 33, so that was like between then and then, it was like 3 years. And all that time I went to meetings. I went to meetings for the wrong reasons at first, but then I really identified with the people. I loved the people in AA, and I just kept going back, even though I was still taking the Valium and I was trying not to drink, but occasionally I still did drink. So there was a turning point. When I left, I wasn't with him anymore, and I went to a different group. I went to the Marinette group, which is where I got sober. And I met my first sponsor, Carolyn. And I knew if I asked Carolyn to be my sponsor, I would have to be serious because I had seen a lot of people get sober, and Carolyn was their sponsor. And they just took it very seriously. And I knew, she wouldn't put up with anything if I wasn't serious. So Carolyn told me about her psychiatrist. I went to her psychiatrist who detoxed me from all the medication, all the Valium, in a much safer way than I had tried to do it before. It was not as awful as when I was going completely cold turkey after taking it. And he cut me down a little bit at a time. I went to meetings during that time, but I wasn't allowed to talk. She wouldn't let me say anything until I was sober. And then on July 2nd, 1980, that was the first meeting I went to where I didn't have anything in my body, not a pill, not a drink. I couldn't believe I was sitting there at that Thursday night meeting, the Ascension Church in Harrison, New York. And I had nothing in my system except my higher power and my belief that if I did what I was told to do here, I could get well. And what a gift that was. Only now, I look back at it now and I can just see what a gift it was. I had no idea at the time. My sponsor, Carolyn, had come out of the meeting one night when I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And she said to me, Lynn, you're a very sick woman and you don't even know it. And I had this moment of clarity, this little moment where I thought, oh my God, maybe she knows something that I don't know. Maybe she sees something that I don't see. I must have been blind. I don't know not to see this, but when she said that, I just thought, I'm going to do what she says. And from that moment on, I have not had to take a pill or a drink in my sobriety. And that's be 45 years this coming July. And I'm so grateful for that. Life in sobriety has been so exciting, so scary, so good, so bad. It's been life, life is never just one thing. I met a guy and when I was first, Carolyn and I were working together. I had about, I guess, 2 months, and I met a guy who we became very good friends. We really did become friends, and we could talk about things, and we both, we were both trying not to get involved with each other, but I really, really liked him. He was a really nice guy, really good guy, and different than anybody I had known in the past. I always tell people he would drive with both hands on the wheel, and that appealed to me so much. Just the idea that he was a safe person, he was sensible, he wanted life to be good. He wasn't bad, he wasn't trying to get away with things. And my daughter liked him, and even my mother liked him, which made me kind of second look him, thinking, why does my mother like this guy? She doesn't like anybody, but she liked him. And so we stayed friends for as long as we could, and then we weren't friends anymore. And we got a lot of flack from the group because, we were too new. It could have gone the other way. He was divorced and had a couple of kids, and it could have been a disaster. But thank God, God was watching over us and kept us safe, kept us sober, and we got married when we had about a year, a little bit more than a year sobriety. And that worked out too, because in February, we celebrated 43 years of marriage. So, God was really watching out for me. And it's been a real, he adopted my daughter, which was a beautiful thing. Her father had passed away, and she, there was nothing standing between him adopting her. So she asked him if he'd like to, and he had mentioned it once before, and she wasn't sure. And when he asked her, he said, of course, yes. So she had 5 children with her husband, 5 boys. And, so we have 5 beautiful grandsons. who are now grown up, and the last one's in college for one more year after this. And two of them are married and have babies. And so now we are great grandparents. And I think of all that I would have missed if I didn't do what I learned to do in this program. If I hadn't paid attention to the things that Carolyn taught me, she said my old ideas had to be smashed. She talked about the higher power. I was really kind of scared of the higher power when I first came in. I remember the first time I said the third step prayer, and I thought, oh, here we go. I'm turning my life and my will over to God. What's going to happen to me? And I had a car accident, and I rear-ended somebody. It wasn't bad or anything. It wasn't fatal. It wasn't, but I thought, oh, great. This is what happens when you turn your life and will over to God. And my sponsor said, that's not true. Lots of good things. The only thing that can happen to you when you turn your life and will over to God is good things, because only good things come from God. Everything else comes from somewhere else. And I really believe that. And she was so good for me. She was so positive. And so she gave me so much time. I think of that now when I sponsor people, because she just, every day I would call her from work and she would talk to me, and because I was afraid. I was living without anything in my system. I was going to work and I was driving, and I was going to meetings, and I didn't have any Valium. I didn't have any alcohol in me. And I just would feel like, how can I be doing this? How can this be happening? And sometimes I would just get the greatest feeling being stuck in traffic, going home from work. And I'd look around and I'd just think, oh my God, I'm like a real person now. I'm stuck in traffic with all these other people. And it gave me a good feeling. I used to love to pay my bills, because I never, first of all, never had bills of my own. And then the fact that I could pay a bill was another really good thing. So, we're really, I'm really happy that I listened to a lot of things. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was it's on page 22 in the big book, the phenomenon of craving, because that made so much sense to me when I heard about it after I came in. This is exactly what I always went through. While the alcoholic keeps away from drink, which I did as many times as I could, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. So the problem is in the mind. It wasn't that first drink was a function of a mind that wanted to drink and wasn't healthy enough, didn't know how to stay away from it. But I know once I had that first drink, there was no way to not have more. And I was so convinced so many times. I thought, I'm just going to go out, have one drink, maybe two, and then I'm going to just come home. And I was never, ever able to do that. If I bought a bottle of wine, I would think, this will last me for a few days, like a box of cookies would last me for a few days, right? But it doesn't. It just wouldn't work that way. Once I had that first drink, I couldn't stop until I either passed out, or I was so drunk, or I threw up. I mean, I did a lot of throwing up when I was drinking. And I just, it was just impossible for me to stop. So what Carolyn taught me was that the thing I really needed to do was complete abstinence. And that first step once I realized I was powerless over alcohol and that I knew my life was unmanageable, but I didn't get the connection. And now I knew, the Valium would lead to the alcohol would lead to more alcohol, and it was not going to work. So the only thing I had to do was to go to a lot of meetings. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days, really more than that, because in Mamaroneck we had two meetings. We had a beginners meeting and then the regular meeting. So I'd go to two meetings every day in 90 days. And I had to tell my story. That scared me to death, but I remember calling my sponsor during the day and asking her if I could get out of it just this one time, because I just don't think I could do it. I don't think I can get up there and tell my story. And I had about 90 days sobriety, and it was a big group I was going to talk to. And she said, no, she said, you can do it. You can do it. And I got there and I was so nervous, and I got up and I just said, my name's Lynn, I'm an alcoholic. And then I was fine. It just went on from there. And I just knew, Carolyn could tell me after a while that anything would be okay. And I believed it. I believed anything would be okay. And she was my sponsor for my first 5 years. And then we moved to Portchester for a couple of years, and I went to that group. And then we moved to Yorktown Heights, and I had gotten my degree finally. And I got my master's degree so I could teach, which is what I always really wanted to do. And when we lived in Yorktown, I got a job teaching, started in kindergarten, but I moved up to first grade and second grade, and I absolutely loved it. I was there for almost 30 years. And it was a nice school. The kids were good. It was really a nice life, really nice life. And I felt like, next to AA, being with the kids was like another gift, because they're just so open, and they love their teacher when they're that age. They're not rebellious yet or anything. They think you walk on water, you live in the classroom. And whenever I'd go to the grocery store, I'd see them, Mrs. Crop, Mrs. Crop. And it was just so nice. I loved it. And then when we decided we wanted to move to Virginia, I retired and married our daughter, and her son and her husband and their 5 sons lived here. And we wanted to be closer to them. So we moved to Northern Virginia. And it's just been great. My relationship with them is really good. My grandchildren certainly have never seen me drunk. I wish my daughter never had, but we can talk about it today. She remembers an experience where we went to a wedding, and it was my cousin's wedding, and I just couldn't stop drinking. Oh my God, I was so drunk at that wedding. And she kind of, I think at the time we went out to the car to go home, and all I wanted to do was go back in and drink some more. And she'll kind of make fun of me for it sometimes, which makes me feel better that she's not afraid to talk about it. But our relationship is good today. I've always, that triangle thing that I got into with my mother, my daughter, it was really tough, because it was like my mother wanted all of my daughter, or she was afraid, if I took her, she'd lose her. I don't know what it was, but it was a very uncomfortable triangle. It was not a good place to be. And having been stuck in it, I don't know. I just look back at it and I'm like, thank God I got out. Thank God whatever had to happen to get me out of there was good, because that was not a happy place to be. And today, I am happy. Today, I'm retired and I have lots of time to do the things I want to do. I've discovered crocheting and amigurumi, which is crocheting little animals. And I like doing that. And, you know, we have a little dog named Hobbs, who we've always had dogs. So I love my dogs, and we're happy. We go to a lot of meetings. Um, Sometimes when I do get unhappy, I gotta say it's up here. It starts up here. I start projecting because I think, wow, what could possibly come next? It can't be anything good. I'm getting old now, you know, what's going to happen next? And I get scared and I think about, I don't know, all kinds of, you can imagine. I'm sure you've all had the same thoughts at some time. And I get worried and then I get unhappy. And I have to remember the thing to do is to spend more time with God, because that's the one thing that always saves me. I have a sponsor and I call my sponsor and she's good and I'm glad we talked. But spending that time with my higher power is just so important to me. That's the thing that really keeps me from falling into myself. Because I'm still self-centered. I learned in those fourth and fifth steps that I'm a selfish person, that I have a character defects. I'm easily jealous, I'm envious, and all those character defects are still there. They're not driving me crazy the way they did when I first came in, but they're still there. And I have to constantly work to keep them from coming out. And we have a group in our group on Fridays. We have a Friday meeting that's always step 6 or 7. It rotates. 1 week it's step 6, 1 week it's step 7. And that has helped me so much. That's really where the answers are, to being willing to let go of these character defects, and finding out that the more I let go, the more peace I have, and the more of God's good things can come into me. And my first sponsor, Carolyn, always told me that God's will for you is better than anything you can plan. And I have to say, she was absolutely right, because today I have things in my life I never even would have thought to want. And they're the most important things in my life today. I don't know what else to say. I think I'm just about out of time. But I just want to thank everybody for listening, and thank you for being in AA with me and being so there for me whenever I need to talk. Thank you so much.